Is it possible for me to figure out what is happening in a random episode of Jujutsu Kaisen completely out of context? Despite being from an incredibly popular series, I haven't seen, read, or even heard anything that would give me any clues. And despite being a serialized show, meant to be watched in order, I decided to, instead, randomly pick from among the highest rated episodes in the series, and watch it completely blind. So the episode starts off with these two guys falling, and then we immediately cut to the opening credits. Everyone is competing to see who can look cooler while moving in slow motion, and there's also a panda standing over here. Looking at the sheer number of characters with unique designs, I know I'm about to be completely lost, but there's plenty of cool things to look at. So we start off with this guy, who I'm going to immediately assume is the main character. At first, I thought he was surrounded by two generic-looking enemies, but it turns out it was just one generic-looking enemy, who actually isn't generic at all. He's really strong and super fast. Apparently he's a perfected form of Maki, whatever that means. A bunch of rabbits appear around the main character, and at first I couldn't tell if they were helping him or attacking him, but it seemed like they were actually helping him, so maybe he's a summoner of some kind. He gets smacked around a bit, and then the generic perfect Maki-san commits some animal cruelty. I guess that answers my question about the rabbits. We cut away from the battle to this knowyer-looking detective, and hey, the panda's here too. So, if I understand this scene correctly, the detective knows that things are about to get crazy, and he's intentionally making excuses and avoiding making any progress, because he doesn't want to get caught up in anything too dangerous. But he also needs to stop the panda from running off and getting itself killed. I think this was the part of the story I understood the most, so let me know how I did. Was I even close? These two characters, who I also don't know, show up out of nowhere, and the panda says there are more enemies hiding nearby. They want the nowhere detective to surrender, but I'm not sure what their actual goal is specifically, or why they would need him to surrender instead of just ignoring him, since he wasn't doing anything anyway. Apparently he's a sorcerer, and I'm gonna find out a little bit later that's probably important in some way that I still don't completely understand. We cut back to the summoner, who's running all over the city, getting chased and continually beaten up by the generic perfect Maki-san. Oh, and hey, there's a bird. So he is definitely a summoner of some kind. He keeps tripping and falling like a teenager trying to escape from Michael Myers. But unfortunately, before I can make sense of the situation, we cut away to a scene that makes no sense to me. There are some monsters just standing around while two people are talking. I guess the monsters are meant to keep this woman safe, and there's someone named Nanami who is wandering around the city. Maybe Nanami is their ally, and they're worried about other people finding them here and attacking them, but this guy, who might be the principal, and I think she's a teacher or maybe a school nurse. Anyway, he's more concerned about whether or not she's going to quit smoking, which is probably a good idea because it's bad for you. Anyway, the summoner is trying to win with a short, decisive victory by luring the generic perfect Maki-san into a trap and electrocuting him. But it seems to do no damage at all. Well, that's not good. So the summoner is under the impression that if he sustains injuries during the battle, that someone else can simply heal him later on, and this would give him an advantage. Oh, okay. So when I was writing my script, I realized that this guy might actually be Nanami-san, and he wants to get back to where the school nurse is, because she was also talking about healing people. If this is completely wrong, feel free to laugh at me, but it was the best I could come up with. So in the end, he tries to do that anime technique where you intentionally let your opponent stab you, and then you use that opening to counter them with a lethal strike. But I was surprised that it didn't work at all. The much faster, stronger enemy just escaped from the hold and avoided the attack completely. And then the most incomprehensible sequence of the entire episode played out. So the generic perfect Maki-san seems like he's the child of somebody who sold him to another guy in this flashback because he has some kind of special technique. But also, I thought maybe he was actually the adult in this scene and he was trying to sell his own kid to this other guy. I legitimately did not understand anything that was happening already. And then it resulted in this super powerful enemy just coming out of the flashback, stabbing himself in the head, and he completely gives up on trying to kill the guy he'd been chasing this whole time. But then, when the summoner walks over to check on his body, he's just been hit with the substitution jutsu, and there's some dead guy with a mohawk there instead. Okay, so hold on a second. he replaced his own body with the body of a different target while he was attacking himself so that he could escape. But he was much faster and stronger, and he was the one chasing the summoner guy. So why wouldn't he just escape instead of stabbing himself in the head? Well, whatever. The summoner guy, who might be Nanami-san, is relieved at first that he somehow won. I don't know how he pulled it off either. But then he immediately gets backstabbed by this other guy that I also don't know. I guess he was just waiting to get this epic kill steal? Okay, so the next thing that happens is that these other 5 characters are having a secret meeting somewhere. And yes, it's 5 more characters that I haven't met before, and oh wait, I actually know these 2 over here. And I think this is a flashback. Okay, this might help me understand what's going on right now. So I think their goal is to make the sorcerers propagate and get rid of the cursed spirits. Those are his own words, not mine. And they were following this guy named Geto-sama. I think I actually kind of understand this. We've established there's 2 different factions, the sorcerers and the cursed spirits, and both groups are, I think, separate from the normal humans, and they're both working against each other, maybe in secret? Or maybe this battle's happening now because of this secret meeting? The weird thing about this scene is it really loves to not show the characters' faces while they're talking, but I got a decent idea of who everyone is. And the group here seems like they had already split up in the past, so that might be why all 5 of them aren't together in the present scene. But they did agree that they'll meet again one day, while continuing to carry on the will of Geto-sama, who I guess is maybe dead. In the present, the Noir detective does not seem worried about these guys at all, so these are probably not the enemies that he was scared of. He's prepared to fight his way out, but then suddenly a big explosion happens nearby, which seems to freak everybody out. And yeah, you guessed it, more unrelated characters just showed up out of nowhere. Well, actually, these are the 2 from the very beginning of the episode. They start flying around and fighting so fast that it was actually difficult for me to take screenshots. This is the absolute definition of like too fast for the human eye to follow. So the Cyclops guy keeps getting his arms cut off, but they keep regrowing in the next shot. This is something I really noticed when I was collecting the screenshots later on. It seems pretty obvious that the other guy's still winning though. I couldn't tell if he was supposed to be a sorcerer or something else, and he doesn't seem to be associated with the followers of Geto-sama either. So maybe he's just like the Joker, and he just showed up to make this episode even more confusing and chaotic than it already was. Apparently, he gets his powers from the fingers, like some sort of Elden Ring character, which might explain why the other guy keeps cutting off his fingers. In spite of that, he's able to use a really powerful attack that sets the entire place on fire. It starts collapsing buildings, and I think he might have even summoned a volcano in the middle of the city, but the Joker dude is just like T-posing on him this entire time, and the battle is so one-sided. The Noir detective realizes just how bad this situation is, and he tries to convince the followers of Geto-sama to run away with him, because he thinks if they try to fight each other here, they're all just going to be killed by the Joker and the guy who already reached max level in Elden Ring. Meanwhile, the Elden Ring guy starts casting Meteor from Final Fantasy, which is obviously bad news. And just when the people on the ground are thinking of escaping altogether, the T-posing guy just appears in the middle of them, and he warns them if they move, he will kill them. So they just have to stand there and wait for the meteor to hit them. I have no idea why he did this, and it seems like he's just flexing on everyone right now. But at the very last second, he dodges, and it looks like everyone else at least tried to get away too. I saw there was like a brief flash where all the characters disappeared from the screen right before the meteor hit. Now he admits if he didn't dodge that meteor, he would have actually taken some serious damage, and it looks like he's more interested in the Cyclops dude now. But he's still completely disrespecting him. Instead of relying on like his main abilities and his fighting style, he comes up with this other idea of just like using the enemy's expertise and fighting him with his own special ability. In this case, they're gonna have a battle of fire against fire. I found it funny that the cursed spirit, oh, by the way, apparently this guy's a cursed spirit, so now I know what that is. So I found it funny that he thinks the Joker guy's specialty is like cutting and slicing attacks, but the guy just responds by saying, I'm not gonna explain to you how my abilities work. So I guess he's trying to deconstruct all of the villain tropes. This makes me think that he must be the villain in this situation, right? While the cursed spirit is like maybe a good guy, it's honestly hard to tell who is associated with who in this show, because it doesn't feel like the followers of Geto-sama or the Noir detective have anything to do with either of these two characters. And let's not forget that the guy who I thought was the main character hasn't appeared on screen for like half the episode now. And there's 2 more characters hiding out in a completely undisclosed location. And you know what? Let's just move past it. The cursed spirit gets blasted so hard he gets shot into some kind of afterlife realm, where he's allowed to talk with a couple of his friends. More characters, of course, we've never seen before. They might have died in previous episodes or seasons, that's the impression I'm getting, but they're all relying on this guy named Mahito, who I think is maybe still alive, and they think he could still carry out their goals, whatever those goals are. Regardless, they agree that they'll meet again in the next life. But the villain shows up just to interrupt this touching reunion and drags him right back to reality, where it's revealed the battle's already over and this guy was charred beyond recognition. It was such a stomp, he didn't even get to die on screen. Then another new person shows up just to tell me Sukino-sama's name, which would have been really good to know earlier in the script writing process. Thanks a lot. And then we cut back to this scene. So the sneak attacking guy with the side ponytail looks like he's been cornered by some kind of monster. And now, well, maybe you regret sneak attacking the main character, because it would have been nice to have someone help you fight that monster, huh? So, in terms of story and characters, this show made me feel like I was reading Dark Souls item descriptions and trying to make sense of the story, but maybe that's my own fault. If I had watched the previous few dozen episodes, I might understand at least half of what was being said. The preview for the next episode tells me that it's part 2 of this current situation, but to me, this did not feel like part 1. It felt like it started right in the middle of things. Either way, if I watch the next episode, I might get some kind of conclusion or explanation to what I'm witnessing. Or I could simply pick another random episode to watch out of order. It would be kind of fun to see how many additional new characters show up that are even more unrelated to the 3 or 4 groups that I had already met. And of course, I'm sure there will be plenty of people who want to tell me that I should watch the entire show properly from the beginning, as it's meant to be watched, but I suppose that's what the comments section is for, right? Even if it felt like I was being overwhelmed by the number of characters, I really enjoyed the art and the wide range of character designs. And honestly, I could tell that the lore and the abilities in this show are very deep and creative. It feels like the kind of story that would have rewarded me if I had watched it properly in sequence, right? But it was also a lot of fun to see a random episode with no context, and that's something you can only do once, so I'm glad I did it. I wonder if I should do something like this again. Well, I'll leave that up to the comments section. For now, enjoy the rest of your day.